The housing market has approximately 92,600 housing units, a median sale price of 610,000, just over 4,200 homes sold in 2024, and around 2,000 homes are currently listed for sale as of this month. In 2024, the island saw 1.7 million visitor arrivals, 3.23 billion in visitor spending, with non-lodging visitor spending around $131 per person per day. The county has 55 hotel properties totaling just over 6,800 rooms. The occupancy rate is at 68% with an average daily rate of $430 and revenue per available room of $293. There are just over 8,000 short-term rental units that are active with an occupancy of 65%, average length of stay of 4.3 days, average daily rates of $379, and the top markets being Kailua Kona, Waikoloa, and Kiau. Now, as mentioned earlier, a key part of the study process involved getting feedback from local stakeholders through these different surveys. And so the resident survey totaled 1,726 responses, with 87% identifying as full-time residents, 12% as Native Hawaiian, 41% residing on the island for more than 20 years, and 77% not having any affiliation with an STR in any way. The supply survey recorded 688 responses from STR owners or operators, with 40% renting a unit as their secondary home, 28% renting their primary residency, 20% renting a unit as an investment, and 69% self-managing their unit. The demand or visitor survey recorded 101 responses, with 41% of visitors indicating that they stayed in an STR during their trip. 24% would have not made the trip if the STR were not available. 60% took part in nature-based experiences, and 40% were groups of 4 people or more. Now, this just gives a quick overview of the type of respondents for each of the surveys, but in the next few slides, we'll go over more survey questions and different implications that were drawn from these. Now, in terms of the economic impact of short-term vacation rentals on Hawaii Island in 2024, based on data from AirDNA, lodging revenue from short-term rentals totaled approximately $710 million, which is very comparable to the $729 million generated from hotel revenue, hotel room night revenue. And then, as mentioned earlier, according to DBEDT, the average per person daily spend outside of lodging was 132, which, based on the total visitor arrivals and visitor length of stay, it equates to a total of 560 to 860 million of non-lodging spent to the island from those short-term vacation rental visitors. Now, if the 24% of short-term vacation rental users would have not traveled to the island if the short-term rental were not available, as found in the survey results, it would represent a loss of 112 to 170 million in lodging revenue and around 136 to 207 in non-lodging revenue. This also resulted in a 3.3 to 5.1 million in foregone TAT revenue to the county. And then in terms of jobs, using our survey results, we estimated that 12,000 full-time jobs and 30,000 part-time jobs would be lost if the short-term rentals were banned. While we understand that it's likely that some of these jobs would be absorbed into the hotel market, it's unlikely that the county would be able to recapture all of that lost employment. Since the short-term vacation rental permitting process started in 2023, there's been an estimate of 3,500 registered units in the county. However, outside databases show us upwards of 8,000 active units, suggesting that not all of the units are currently being registered, and the county is not collecting that full amount of the TAT and GET on these properties. Based on Hunden's modeling, in 2024, there was an approximately 12 million of unreported and uncollected TAT revenue and around 1.6 million of uncollected GET revenue. Now, some likely explanations for this gap include inconsistent enforcement and the lack of short-term vacation rental platform-level data sharing, as well as tax compliance issues of underreporting revenues, some legal and political hurdles, and the cost of documentation. Now, on the following slides, Derek's going to touch on some of the implications of these findings and what we were able to draw.
So taking all of those surveys, the market research, and just formulating them into some key takeaways and implications. Our survey results showed that if short-term vacation rentals were unavailable, up to 24% of visitors would not have made the trip at all. 26% of visitors would stay in a full service or luxury hotel. 19% would have rented a timeshare or a condo, and 14% would have chosen a limited service hotel option. This indicates that the short-term vacation rental ban could result in a loss of close to 1/4 of all lodging, food and beverage, transportation, shopping, and entertainment spending. The short-term vacation rental market primarily appeals to budget-conscious travelers, those traveling in larger groups, and frequent short-term vacation rentals across all their vacations across the world. While the hotel market is dominated by luxury properties catering more to affluent visitors. All visitors surveys, regardless of lodging type, prioritize nature-based outdoor recreation. STVR visitors were more likely by 79% to engage in these activities, as well as engaging in local culture on the island. While that growth in wellness tourism and related trends is national, Hawaii County is poised to continue to grow in this space in wellness and community well-being, and that will remain a central focus to the Hawaii Island Tourism Strategic Plan. If short-term vacation rentals were restricted on the island, only 4% of those owners surveyed indicated that they would definitely convert their listed units to long-term rentals. 68% indicated that they would not convert those rentals to long-term rentals. And this suggests that likelihood of short-term vacation rentals converting to long-term housing for residents is minimal. And those survey findings do align with the case studies research that we did. Both hotel and short-term vacation lodging revenues exceeded $700 million annually on Hawaii Island, with additional daily visitor spend, as Franco called out earlier, at about $130 per person per day. We also discovered just through the AirDNA platform that most of those short-term vacation rentals are concentrated within those top designated resort zones. As far as resident sentiment towards tourism, we found it to be largely positive through the survey results. Respondents recognized the importance to the local economy, job creation, and cultural vibrancy. Most did not find that short-term vacation rentals have negatively impacted their neighborhood or quality of life. 56% do perceive that housing costs and availability have increased due to tourism, but 61% said that short-term vacation rentals have not deterred them from renting or purchasing property. And then finally, more than 75% of short-term vacation rental owners operate only one unit, and 54% rely on the income to cover housing-related costs. Only 20% of the owners viewed their property as a pure investment, suggesting that the majority of those owners are operated by individuals with personal financial stake rather than large-scale investors. Jump to the next one. We wanted to take a look at two scenarios and two outcomes. The first being short-term vacation rentals as they currently exist today. Approximately 3,500 units are registered island-wide. However, AirDNA and stakeholder feedback indicated that a significant number of short-term vacation rentals do remain unregistered, meaning that the county is potentially not collecting the full amount of TAT and GAT revenues. Based on the average STVR listings and our calculations, those numbers could be up to $12 million in TAT revenue and $1.6 million in GET revenue. And some residents and local groups have expressed concerns that these STVRs strain local infrastructure, create traffic congestion, and reduce long-term housing availability. Without STVRs, if we looked at introducing a strict ban, this could look at more than $110 million in annual lodging revenue lost, more than $135 million in annual non-lodging visitor spending lost, more than $3.35 million in foregone Hawaii County TAT revenue annually, and then more than 10,000 full-time jobs and 30,000 part-time jobs across the island. Additionally, through those survey results, through the case studies, we believe that this would not significantly increase home ownership opportunities for residents, going back to that 4% of STVR owners that reported that they would convert their housing to long-term housing. And finally, we concluded with 4 key recommendations. Number 1 being continue to closely monitor that STVR usage and supply growth on a biannual basis to see how those numbers are trending from year to year. We think that targeting 100% compliance within that STVR registration to ensure that the county is capturing those economic benefits would be a recommendation. Considering implementing strategic development guidelines for STVRs located within resort zones versus those located outside of resort zones. And finally, exploring public-private partnerships to develop housing for local residents, ensuring that community members receive prioritized access to that inexpensive housing.
This outcomes, the 2 dichotomies that they looked at, the today with STVRs and introducing strict bans without STVRs, was that a direction that you gave them to look at, or was that something they came up with?
No, we had very little direction from the department on how they would conduct their study, as we wanted it to be as objective as possible based on the data that they collected. So those outcomes were strictly based off of their findings.
Okay, thank you. So to the researchers, thank you for being with us today and sharing this information. I'm wondering why you came up with that dichotomy, given that we've never talked about introducing strict bans. It's not really, I'm just wondering how you came up with that, because there are so many other things that I think we're interested in knowing about, and that isn't really one. So how did you come up with using that as the kind of balance to look at outcomes with what we have today?
Yeah, I can start, and Derek and Franco, please feel free to add to this. But it's a great question. The directive was not to necessarily study one or the other, but to look at the range of impacts. Feedback that was gleaned from stakeholders, owners, operators, and residents in our conversations, there was talk of or sentiment around what if this occurs. And so we looked at those 2 dichotomies intentionally to say, what if this happened? This would be sort of the impact of it not existing if that were ever to take place. So we looked at that more for I guess an extreme example to say, here's the full impact if it were to go away. There are certainly, as you mentioned, and in different places where we work across the country and internationally, different ways to approach management and regulation. We're not recommending or thought that anyone was considering a full ban, but just to show the range of impact.
I'd put the resolution forward to complete this economic analysis when we were in the throes of discussing Bill 121 and its many redevelopments, I think, over the course of a year and a half of community engagement. And one of the things community members really wanted to know was, well, what exactly does the short-term vacation rental market look like on Hawaii Island? Because we've got statewide data, but nothing really that encapsulates the uniqueness of how STVRs are operating on Hawaii Island. And I think that this study really does the market justice. I think that there were many assumptions that were being made about how prevalent STVRs were, who was operating them. And so it's really great to have this data to know that many of our local residents actually do rely on this to support their household income, that so many of folks that operate TVRs actually self-manage them. That's a pretty significant number. And then when folks are, thinking about Hawaii Island as a destination, they're choosing to stay in STVRs. And if they're completely phased out, which is not something that we are looking to do, but if they're completely phased out, there is going to be significant impact to economy, way of life, occupation. So just really appreciate the data and the recommendations. This is definitely going to help Councilmember Kimball and I as we begin to shape, what new legislation could look like, recognizing the fact that they're here. And we want to make sure that we're capturing all of the necessary GET and TAT. I think the findings here were very, just very stark that there's so much uncaptured monies because folks are operating under the radar. So just really appreciate the engagement and the great work and for this very specific Hawai'i Island data. Thank you. I yield.
With respect to the stats that 93% of these are whole home rentals or entire home rentals, was that figure based on your AirDNA analysis, or was that figure based on the respondents of the survey? Are the whole house rentals presumed to be unhosted, or is there another way that you are looking at the determination between hosted or unhosted?
So AirDNA does not specify if they're hosted or unhosted. They just offer how many rooms, whole house versus partial house. So us determining if it was hosted or unhosted, those would be through the survey results of the owners.
And what is the percentage that are hosted versus unhosted?
Unhosted would be just shy of about 20%. In our supply side survey, we broke down and asked questions about the unit and how they make it available. 27.6% own the unit as their primary residence. 40% own it as a secondary or part-time resident, and just about 20% use it as an investment property, and it is exclusively used for visitors.
Okay, so just to my colleagues, I think this is one of the interesting numbers that by having our registration process, we'll be able to look at, because it's been challenging, and even those data points just shared, if it is not your primary residence, but you use it as a temporary residence, unless you have an operator on site while you're gone, it still constitutes an unhosted rental per our rules. And so reconciling these different percentages with the way that we are actually determining hosted and unhosted is going to be important. And I bring that up on page 81 of the study is one of the questions, the survey questions: how likely are you to support STRs in your community if, and if they're owner occupied hosted, it's 67% are supportive of the STVR, and 33% unlikely to be supportive. If you look at the unhosted number, it's completely flipped. So if the STR is unhosted, only 71% are not supportive, are not likely to be supportive, and it's roughly 30% that are. So, I think when we've been talking about Bill 121 and how to move forward with this process and clarify Chapter 25 on what is permitted and isn't permitted, I mean, the sentiment coming from the community is supportive of those bed and breakfast, those hosted rentals where there is somebody on site that it is actually managing the property and managing the visitors. So, moving forward, we will continue to look at preserving that option, which was always the intention of Bill 121 anyway.